Hello everyone, my name is Infinity and welcome back to Readings from the Imperial Library. Today we will be reading from an old text from both the perspectives of in-game context and real-life context, because today's reading is from none other than the first edition of the Pocket Guide to the Empire that was included in the user's manual to the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard. The reason I chose this text was because of the fact it provides a lot of insights into the original concept of Tamriel and all of her provinces back when the creators of the Elder Scrolls lore first started to flesh out the lands that years later we all would spend so much time exploring and adventuring in. For context, where most people believe that the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, released in 2002, was the first game to flesh out and shift the lore of TES into the direction the authors like Michael Kirkbride wanted to explore, with concepts like Chim and the Godhead, as well as characters like Lorcan and Vivek, in reality the first game to do this was actually the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, which released back in the distant year of 1998, and the user's manual to the game, more specifically the section dedicated to the text we'll be reading from today, is evident of this, providing details that would show up years later in future installments to the franchise. Before we start, I would like to point out I will be dedicating multiple videos to the individual sections of this text, and I will of course be starting with the introductory section, as well as lumping in the preface because of how short it is. The next videos in this series will be dedicated to the individual sections of the book, each covering the individual provinces of Tamriel, from Skyrim to the bizarrely named Wild regions. As always, there is a link in the description to the text, so you can read along with me. But for now, let's begin the reading, shall we? A Pocket Guide to the Empire and its Environs, 1st edition. Author Imperial Geographical Society. Librarian comment. This pocket guide was written in the early years of Tiber Septim's reign and contains Imperial propaganda and biased information. As such, it is not only an overview of Tamriel and its inhabitants, but also how these lands and people are viewed by the Empire. In addition to the Imperial document, notes appear throughout by one YR, who appears to be an elf with strong anti-Imperial sentiments. YR's notes appear in red at the bottom of the text, with the section of the main text that they refer to likewise highlighted in red. And for those of you listening, I will be reading back YR's notes after we read through the text just to provide some very interesting insights after the fact. Our transcription includes some information not available in the final version of the Pocket Guide. The information was taken from the Pocket Guide design document provided to the library by Michael Kirkbride. The document begins. Being a description of the lands and the diverse customs of the inhabitants, and furthermore a useful history of those places of interest by nature of the locations and influence. Dedicated to the unswerving commitment to truth and knowledge of His Most Discerning Majesty, the Emperor Tiber Septim. Promulgated under the authority of the Imperial Geographical Society. Common Era 864. Just as a side note to the listener, there are multiple sketches that pop up throughout this text by none other than Michael Kirkbride. I will most definitely include these in the video when they pop up so you can see them for yourself. And while there aren't any in this introductory section, or the following section which is the preface, there is a nice little map of Tamriel here that points out the provinces of the continent as well as their respective capitals. What's interesting to point out is that this map is of the 2nd era Tamriel, which means a lot of the capitals of the provinces are actually different than they are in the 3rd and 4th era. For example, Skyrim's capital during this time was Winterhold, not Solitude, and Cyrodiil, interestingly enough, the capital of Cyrodiil is not the Imperial City, it is actually just called Cyrodiil. One more little detail I noticed about this map is that the province of Blackmarsh just does not have a capital. Every other province has a capital pointed out for it, but because the Imperial scholars during the 2nd era knew nothing about the region, Blackmarsh does not have a capital pointed out on the map. For those of you who want to know, the capital of Blackmarsh is Lilmoth, at least during the time of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Welcome, citizen. Shions of the Emperors, King of Earth and Sky, Lord of Shining Host, Protector of Oathmen, Freemen, and Yalmen, Guarantor of Right and Justice, Broad Blessings of Thrones and Powers, Sinnoh Shore of Celestial Glory, the Most High, Tiber Septim. The 8 invocations and 16 acceptable blasphemies. These 8 invocations and 16 blasphemies are actually the 8 divines and 16 Daedric princes. The 16 Daedric princes are actually backwards for some reason, meaning you can't really read them properly, but thankfully they included a actual correct version at the bottom, so I'll just read them as though they are normal. The 8 invocations read as, to Akatosh, whose perch from eternity allows the day, to Kinnereth, who returns the masculine breath, to Debella who pay men in moans, to Arche who braves the diminuto, to Julianos who incants the damned equation, to Mara who fills the empty and drains the stones, to Zenithar who provider of our ease, to Stendar who suffers men to read. Next is the 16 acceptable blasphemies, which reads, to Vermina, weaver of the panoply, to Sanguine who tastes the shaven fruit, to Hermaeus Mora who holds the paper to the light, to Meridia who contains the plenum, to Azora, the rim of all holes, to Periate whose foundation is falling rock, to Nocturnal whose touch is mink, to Clivicus Vile who always answers, to Mephalu who threads the needle with the hair of wives, to Namira whose works endure forever, to Molag Bal whose breath is most foul, to Sheagorath the comforter of men, to Merun's Dagon whose mistress is blazing sun, to Malakath who speaks all language sideways, to Hursine who is half the conscience of men, to Boethia the fount of inspiration. With the dawn of a new era before us, it is time that we take stock of where we have been and where we are in order to better illuminate the way ahead. Written in the celebration of the Battle of Hunding Bay, which marked the return of all human kingdoms to the unchallenged rule of the Cyrodiilic Emperor, this pamphlet seeks to briefly describe the present provinces of the Empire and the surrounding regions, their history, people, and current condition. We strove to balance timeliness with accuracy and completeness, and we have erred in our zeal to place this valuable guide in the hands of interested citizens everywhere. We beg the kind reader's indulgence. The Empire stretches across Tamriel, the largest known continent of the world. To the north of Tamriel is Atmora, from whence the men of the world came. To the west is Yakuta, the lost native land of the Red Guards. To the east is Akavir, whose armies invaded Tamriel in the previous era. To the south, all is a mystery and the whisper of a lost elven homeland. Tamriel itself is generally divided into 8 major regions: Skyrim, Cyrodiil, High Rock, the Aldmeri Dominion of the Somerset Isles and Valenwood, Hammerfell, Morrowind, and the Elsewhere Confederacy. Some of these, such as Morrowind or Skyrim, have historically been unified into kingdoms. Others, such as High Rock or Elsewhere, are looser groupings of many kingdoms, chieftains, village confederations, and so forth, united under a dominant race or culture. At its zenith, the Second Empire formally organized these disparate groups into the Imperial provinces, which were administered by provincial governors, either dispatched directly from Cyrodiil or appointed from the native populations. Morrowind is a notable exception, having never been conquered by the original Cyrodiilic Empire, and thus escaping investment as an imperial province. With the fall of the Cyrodiilic Empire, control reverted to the individual rulers of each province, resulting in centuries of chaos as many of the provinces developed into independent kingdoms and petty statelets. Now, happily, all of the human kingdoms have been recovered by the Third Empire of Tiber Septim, and once again they all bear the proud title of imperial provinces. The Aldmeri Dominion, the Elsewhere Confederacy, and Morrowind have yet to join the Empire, but are described in this book for the edification of the scholar, the fascination of the common citizen, and the preparation of the soldier. The Third Empire is yet in its youth, and who can predict what new horizons might yet greet the dawn under the Red Diamond's banner? Some regions escape provincial classification due to the primitive civilizations of their beastfolk inhabitants. Collectively, these beastfolk states are known as the Wild Regions, which may or may not be of interest to the Emperor. They are included only for the most intrepid of travelers and to throw the achievements of civilization into more brilliant relief by contrast with these benighted corners of Tamriel. Now, citizen, we entreat you to review our modest survey of the Empire's dominions. If it entertains and edifies, reflect not upon the humble labors of this scribe, but on the gracious benevolence of our beloved Emperor, whose very name is as ambrosia upon our tongues, who in his wisdom has ordained that this survey be created and distributed among the earnest and wise people of Tamriel, that they might better understand the glories and challenges of these lands and dominions, and that they might better appreciate the great burdens of rulership he bears in our names with such fortitude. A note on Elven designations. The Elves as a whole are sometimes referred to as the Aldmeri or the Elder races. Their individual pedigrees are likewise referred to by both their human and Aldmeri names. Thus, High Elves are Altmer, Dark Elves the Dunmer, Wood Elves the Bosmer, etc., etc. Mer is also used to denote a single elf. Words that designate an elven member of a profession or trade can therefore correctly be said as Craftsmer, for example, or Noblemer. With this note, this ends the introduction, but there still are notes from our mysterious friend YR, which I'm going to go over really quick. In the beginning, when it says that this pamphlet was written in celebration of the Battle of Hunting Bay, which marked the return of all human kingdoms to the unchallenged rule of the Cyrodiilic Empire, when the part where it says unchallenged rule, YR says this remains to be seen. Our second note can be found in the section talking about the different continents of Tamriel. When it talks about Admora, Yakuta, and Akavir, it also mentions a mysterious whisper about a lost elven homeland. YR writes, so even the humans have heard of Old Elnefey. Old Elnefey, for those who don't know, is supposedly the lost continent of the elves, where most of the elven races originated from. Nobody knows for sure if it does or does not exist, but the elves seem to believe that it did at one point. The third note seems to refer to when the pamphlet talks about how all of the human kingdoms have been recovered by the Third Empire of Tiber Septim. On the part that says that they all bear the proud title of Imperial provinces, YR says that this is breathtaking arrogance. The fourth and final note is fittingly enough on the part about elven designations. In the beginning of that part it reads, the elves as a whole are sometimes referred to as the Aldmeri or the Elder Races. Their individual pedigrees are likewise referred to by both their human and Aldmeri names. For some reason YR on the part about pedigrees says this is dangerous racialism. There shall be no accommodation as with Remen. If I'm being honest, I don't understand this last note. Perhaps YR is upset that they are being compared to a breed of animal, but at this point I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that he believes that for some reason them talking about their individual pedigrees for some reason is dangerously racial, and he compares it to the Remen Empire, which was the second Cyrodiilic Empire. After these notes, this is officially the end of the introductory part, but I'm still going to read the preface because it's actually extremely short and gives us more context onto who exactly YR is. For those who are wondering, the preface here is actually a letter from this person YR to his uncle and gives us a little bit more context as to why he is making notes in these books. Apparently, he has sent a copy of the first edition of the Pocket Guide to the Empire to the Aldmeri Dominion during the reign of Tiber Septim, more specifically during his campaign to acquire all of the provinces of Tamriel and put them all under his regime. The preface reads, Severest Uncle, before taking my post as military attaché in the so-called Imperial City, a foreshadowing of the pretensions of these humans, I took your advice and made a sojourn across the outlands, both within this newborn empire and those regions it is yet to acquire. Make no mistake, Talos, now Tiber Septim and resplendent Cyrodiilic, is still on the ascendant. I now believe the oracles have been badly misinterpreted. Septim may indeed be the Dragonborn as foretold. The Mer must unite at last or be consumed one by one. Father, blessed be his name's numeric mystery, was one of the few on the Thalmor to oppose Undel Crodo's policy of non-intervention, that if continued will be the doom of all elder races. I understand that my present assignment is intended as a punishment for not following in my father's footsteps, but I urge you to overlook our personal disagreements and to relay my findings to the full council. I forward this pamphlet as a sample of the official propaganda from Septim's regime, annotated with my own observations which, while not tempered by age and wisdom, are yet valuable as a record of a naive traveler. YR. And with that, we find out exactly who this YR is. They are a member of the Aldmeri Dominion from the Somerset Isle. They were sent to the Imperial City to serve as a military attaché, which is a military advisor for those who don't know, and is trying to see how much of a threat Tiber Septim can be to the Dominion, which we already know he ended up being a huge threat to them. Regardless, this is the end of the first two sections of the Pocket Guide to the Empire First Edition. I have to say I really do enjoy the two different narratives being told. On one hand, this book is Imperial propaganda that is made for the average citizen of the Empire, while on the other hand it has notes from this YR who is adamantly opposed to the Empire and most of humanity. This leads to the reader taking on two mindsets when reading, and it is very creative. As I said earlier, these two sections are all I'm going to read in this video. In the next one, I will be reading the next section on the province of Skyrim, which fans of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim might find interesting, especially when you consider this text was written roughly 13 years before the game was released. But ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this video today. Say it with me now. Play well, eat well, and of course live well, friends. I've got more videos to make, so I'll see you guys in the next episode of Readings from the Imperial Library.